thanks. So there's two bold statements here. The first one is Waterford is the best place to live. We got voted at in 2021, 2022, so we are the best place to live. And the next piece is some work done, more to do. It's a very good reference, I think, with regards to vacancy and property. So when you look at vacancy, the CSO have very good stats on vacancy throughout Ireland. I'm just showing the Waterford stats here at the moment, but you can see in 2016, we had about 5,200 vacant properties in Waterford. In 2022, we cut that down to 3,871. And I reckon if we did it again today, it would be less than 3,000. Predominantly where our vacancy was, you can see on the right-hand side, was in flats. So we've really looked at how we can tackle that. Also in terraced housing was another one from a housing perspective. There's two great reports here. I'll be honest, they're very, very good reports, but they talk that it's too expensive to deliver vacant housing. I don't necessarily agree with that. It can be done. It just has to be a bit of clever thinking, and it's about what you look at is expensive at the end of the day and what is viable. I think the viability is a very good question. I won't get into that too much today, but I think it's very important to have an understanding of that. I think this is probably one of the best things. When I look at building control, I think this is one of the best diagrams I've ever seen to explain the change in building control over the last number of years. It was done by O'Neill O'Mahony Architects here in Galway, where it looks at 2023, there was 2 certifiers. You look at 2023 and look at the amount of certifiers now required for a dwelling. That's just a dwelling. That's not a complex building that you were trying to discuss this morning. So it's massive. The amount of certifiers today in the building industry is significant. When we look at vacancy, we think of a lot of things and all the challenges that we think of, from vacancy, overshop, tax, soundproofing, building regulations, technical guidance documents, procurement. We come up with all these issues. But there should be only one word we should really think about, and that's reuse, and how we can reuse these buildings. There's 2 great documents here. One is produced by the RAI, Old Houses, New Homes. But the one I'm really focusing on is Bringing Back Homes. It's a manual of how you can bring back existing buildings into reuse. This to me is a really good user guide from someone either starting out or very much professionals, and explains the whole process to you and how you can do this with great case studies. Just because they're Waterford case studies, they're also great. So they've great diagrams. I'm an architect, so I'm a visual person. So they've great diagrams in here that you can really get into it and really understand what you're looking at. This is just one of the diagrams here. So you have an existing building. It was non-residential. You have 4 options that you could do with this building. You could bring it back into 1 dwelling, into 2 dwellings, into 3 dwellings, or 2 dwellings and a shop or commercial purposes. It will tell you if you need planning permission. It will tell you if it needs a fire cert. So along with Mayo's document this morning, this will also assist to tell you if it needs a fire cert. It will also tell you if it needs a disability cert. But it breaks everything down into simple English. I know Owen here spoke about the department and Part B here this morning in simple English. Owen, I'll disagree with you. It's never simple English in my view when you read it. Again, the next diagram explains what you have to do from a building control perspective when you're upgrading these buildings. Fire restrictions, very, very important, particularly when you're looking at multi-use in a building. So you're talking about floors and walls, which I'll get into in a bit. You're talking about heating systems, lighting, fire alarms, upgrading the thermal mass of the building, and replacement of the windows. It explains piece by piece what you need to do and what are the requirements for each one. Very good document available online. Just Google it. Just like the building regulations, it's free also. That's very important. These are 2 examples of properties that we looked at in Waterford. And unfortunately, the people online, it's very difficult, but I'm going to ask the people here in the audience to put their hands up. Which do you think was more viable? The top image or the bottom image? So hands up for the top image. Do you think that was more viable? Okay, very small. And the bottom image, how many think that was more viable? A lot more hands. You're correct. Well done. The bottom image was more viable, actually. So when we looked at this, it's a 4-bed existing property at the moment. If we were to achieve and bring it up to the requirements today, A 4-bed would cost us €92,500 per bed. This is just per bed now I'm speaking about. If you brought it into a 2-bed, which would be a lot easier for us from a fire compliance because it's a 3-story building now, it would cost us about 125,000, where the bottom would cost us about 90,000. Now, bearing in mind those costs were pre-Cona, which I'll explain in a couple of minutes. But you can see it's not always the one that you think maybe would be the more viable one. I suppose I work in the housing sector, so I need to speak about social housing and give people an understanding of social housing. A lot of people don't understand what the requirements of social housing is. So I'm speaking just on Waterford here at the moment. 81% of our need is in the metropolitan city district in Waterford. 11% are classified as having disabilities. 10% are above 60. 11% are above 50 to 59. So that means 21% of our need is an elderly population, or will be viewed as an elderly population. That's very important. The stats are there. There's a bit more stats there that'll explain it to you. The one that I like to point out, though, to people that they don't realise, most of our stock, you can see on the bottom left, the grey is our stock currently, and our demand is kind of the bluey colour here on this screen. I think it's slightly different on everybody's screen. Our demand is massive for 1-bed. That's where our demand is. Over 60% of our demand is for 1-beds. And that's the same across all local authorities. That's just not in Waterford, that's everywhere. But a lot of our housing stock are generally 3-beds. So how do we deal with that? That's going to be a big issue for us all into the future. I suppose I want to speak about how we in Waterford brought vacant properties back into reuse. Some of the stats are there. Now, these stats are probably about 3 to 4 months old, so we've actually done more since. So you can see there's 5 different schemes here, and I'll go through each one of them in a couple of minutes explaining what each one is, but repair and lease, we've delivered 350 dwellings to date. Cona, only 14, but we have a big pipeline. Buy and renew, 190. Renewal construction, 21, and brownfield sites, about 150. So to date, we've delivered 725 derelict, that were previously derelict units back into reuse. That's massive. That's an enormous number we've taken off the housing list. But you can see we still have a big pipeline, over 700 still in our pipeline, which is still enormous. We're only halfway there, and I don't think we'll ever get there, if I'm honest. I suppose everybody talks about the teams, and you need a massive team for this. I suppose there's my teams, small numbers. I think it's 4 permanent staff are working on this. That's a very small number to deliver that number of houses. But they're a great team. That's the one thing I will say about my team. They're a brilliant team, and they work really hard to deliver this. Stakeholders are vital. From the building owner in the first place, auctioneers, consultants, contractors, financial institute, housing ourselves, local authority, which includes the building control side of it, solicitors, state bodies. They're massive. Everybody's a stakeholder. Even dealing with a small dwelling that you're upgrading, you're dealing with most of these stakeholders throughout that process. And working with your stakeholders are vital. We described it here this morning under the building control, how many stakeholders are involved and how many you need to bring in. It's very, very important that we work with our stakeholders. You can see up the top right, each one of these that I've described, I kind of bring in who the stakeholders were for that project, and it gives you an idea of who the stakeholders were. So this is repair and lease. Sorry, you're getting some feedback. This is repair and lease. Repair and lease is basically where we can give as a local authority up to €80,000 of a loan to you as an owner, where you can carry out works to that building. We will lease it off you for 5 to 25 years. You will pay either 80 or 85% of the market value less the loan, because you have to pay us back the loan also as well. This has worked magnificently for us in Waterford. The last stats I think we saw that we deliver 70% of the country's repair and lease, which isn't good. It needs to be rolled out nationally. This is a great example in my view. This is Catherine Street. It was 5 apartments we put it into. It's a protected structure. Everybody runs scared when they see protected structures, but all these examples are protected structures that I'm going to show today, to show it can be done. But you can see the image on the left was the state when they start pre-working on it. The image on the middle is the finished article. And believe it or not, this project has gone through 7 years. They've actually paid back the loan. We're now handing this building back to the owners for reuse, for private letting. That's brilliant. Without this, we wouldn't have been able to do that. People say it can't be done over commercial premises. I lose my hair every time I hear that. Honestly, I get so frustrated. Oh, it can't be done. It can't be done. Yes, it can be done. We just need to think and bring in our stakeholders. And a very important stakeholder is the fire office, the fire team. They are very important, but we can do this. This is another example. 11 O'Connell Street in Waterford, 7 apartments, again a protected structure, 400 metres from the city centre of Waterford. The actual cafe, it's a cafe in the daytime, it's a restaurant in the nighttime. The last time I checked, it's a 3-month waiting list for this restaurant. I haven't got there yet because of the waiting list. But again, you can actually see the building on the right. The owner in the building on the right now, nothing to do with us, has decided to do up their building and rent it out. So this is creating an effect. We started it, someone else is now doing it. This is important for all of us. This can be done anywhere. This is Ireland's largest repair and lease scheme. It's St. Joseph's, Little Sisters of the Poor, moved out of it to a purpose-built building in 2010. I can guarantee you there's every town, city in Ireland has one of these large old convents, and they're just left there decaying. You can see some of the images on the bottom in particular, the decay, top right as well. You can see the decay in this building when we took it on. We worked with the building owners, Walsh and Sheen, and MDP and Partners, an architectural firm in Waterford, to deliver this building. This was complex. As we were opening up this, or as they were opening up, we didn't actually open up, as they opened up this building, they required a revised fire cert because they kept finding stuff and finding more stuff and finding more stuff. But this is the building today. The building is beautiful. 71 new apartments. 50 of them in the main building. 21 of them in outbuildings. 69 are fully accessible. This is what we call an age-friendly scheme. So for any of you who are not familiar with age-friendly, that means people above 55 could actually move into this. So everybody living in this is above 55. It's created a new community within Waterford. But what it's also done is it's removed people that were living in 3 and 4 bed houses that were singularly living on their own and moved into this. Some important facts about this building. There was walls a metre thick. But what that led to is some apartments are 1 beds are 70 square metres because you couldn't knock a metre thick of a wall to move it in 500 or 600 mil to make it the perfect area. You leave it, you work with what you have there. There was a lot of work to be done here, but they've done magnificent work. And I'll talk a little bit about this afterwards and probably a couple of little learnings that we took from this building that I think is very, very important from a building control perspective, be it Part B, Part M and Part E. But again, guys, this can be done. This to me is a catalyst for what can be done across all the country. Buy and renew. This is a very simple scheme. It is what it says on the tin. You buy it and you do it up. It's relatively simple. There's no rocket science to this. Like this building wasn't in major decay, but there was no one living in it. We bought it, 16 apartments, and we put a community drop-in centre on the ground floor. 200 metres from the city centre, this was vacant. A lot of them across Ireland too. You can see actually the image on the right is the actual finished article, not the image on the left, as I've been told a couple of times. We have great designers in Waterford who do Waterford Walls, is what it's called. It's a great art exhibition. But this was a very, very simple project. Very worthwhile. 16 apartments, 16 people off the housing list. This is another simple one. We call it renewal construction, and apologies, these are all lovely terminologies that the Department of Housing have on all these projects. I'm used to them. There might be some new to you, but don't worry, you can contact me and I can explain them. But this is an example of, we had a newsagent who had moved premises out to the outskirts. They left what was an office, 2-storey office, and we converted it back into 2 1-bed apartments. Required fire cert, change of use, required everything. Brought under the building control, finished, 2 lovely 1-bed apartments. Property below that it was kind of like a 2-bed house is what I would describe it. We delivered it back to be a 1-bed. Kind of the attic wasn't really sustainable to be living in that attic. The stairs was a ladder, it wasn't really a stairs. But the great thing about this is the building owner next door to me rang me. He hounded looking for a meeting with me. And normally when people look for a meeting with me, they're there to give out to me. Generally, oh, that man, the council, I want to speak to the head lad down there. And I was called up to meet this man anyway one day. And he came up and he hugged me. And I was like, Jesus, what's happened here? He hugged me because he had rats living beside him for donkey's years. It was infested. Now he has a lovely person living beside him. He's absolutely delighted. That makes my year though. It doesn't often happen, but things like that make my year. And to see this, unfortunately, my clerk who works on this one, value engineered the painting out of it, so I have to have a chat with them about that. But you can see it can be done. Again, very close to the city centre. Look, brownfield sites, I'm not going to go through this. We all have brownfield sites, we're all delivering that. But it's key to us that we need to deliver. This was one house, we delivered, I think it was 14 apartments on this. Density of 93 units to the hectare. This is what we need to be delivering. Croí Cónaithe, the vein of my life at the moment. So Croí Cónaithe basically is a vacant home property grant. You can get up to 50 or 70,000 if the property's been vacant for 2 years. This is an absolutely brilliant scheme. To me, it's removing all the vacancy in the country. It's really making a change. You can see the two images here are kind of the after images now. The top right, we're waiting for a further image on this with the landscaping being done. It's a brilliant scheme, but it's really tackling as detached houses in the countryside from our perspective. But it's also taking a lot of small builders, which that's the piece that's killing me, because it's taken all my small builders who are doing my small works, and they're now doing this. But it's brilliant. Again, we're bringing back vacant units. And you can see there's a lot of people involved in this with stakeholders. Ukraine, it was announced that I did work on the Ukraine humanitarian efforts. I think one Thursday morning, our chief executive rang a couple of us and brought us into a meeting and said, there's a building, I want people in it Monday morning. And I never forget my chief fire officer went white, very white when he heard this. I walked out of the room and left one of my architects there and said, you sort that out, I'm not dealing with this one. But the property on the left-hand side was a burnt shop. It was damaged, it was fire damaged, really, really badly. Literally, we were down there, no drawings, no anything. We had an architect, an engineer, assistant chief fire officer. We had a couple of other parties involved in this. And we literally had, the builder, most important. We literally had a tin of spray, spraying out walls and walking it to make sure it was compliant with all the fire regulations. They worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. I think we opened it roughly on a Wednesday, we opened this building. Hadn't got a fire cert, hadn't got a DAC, didn't go through building control. But thankfully, my chief executive signed off on everything from that perspective. We got a retrospective fire cert, we got it all sorted, but it can be done. Again, it went back to the stakeholders involved in this. Now, we did have a fire marshal on that building while we didn't have a fire cert, etc., but we were down there inspecting this constantly while the works were being done. But again, it shows what can be done. So far in Waterford, we have 350 beds across several vacant units. Up until January this year, over 2,000 people went through those beds. I think the figure's up close to 3,000. Sorry, apologies, I missed this one. I think the figure's now over nearly 3,000 people we put through those beds. From a humanitarian perspective, it's brilliant. Now, the building on the left, we've closed. We don't have a use for that anymore. We're looking at something else for it. But that's what can be done if we put some joined up thinking together. This is a project I want to speak about in detail. This is the bread and butter, in my view, of what can be done. So this is 2029 The Glen in Waterford City. It was a protected structure. It's costing us, let's get into the maths, the nuts and the bolts. It's costing us about 285,000 per unit. I've done this presentation and people went, that's a lot of money, Walter. That's a lot of money. When you look at it, it's not. This is a historic building in the middle of the city. It's bringing back 4 units into something that's disused. And I'll show you after photos of this. It's absolutely brilliant what's been done with this. This building was falling apart, is the easiest way I can describe it to anybody. The whole front facade was starting to peel off this building. Thankfully, we got to purchase it. We tried the CPO route and we agreed terms with the building owner. After some haggling, you can see we bought it for 160,000. That's what we paid for this building. We thought it was good value. We still think it's good value. We're going to pump about 850,000 in construction costs into it to bring it back. That's the realistic terms. But a 1-bed to build in Waterford will cost me roughly 300,000 to build. That's what a 1-bed apartment will cost me when I put everything together from a constructability point of view. That's not design team fees and site costs and all those other lovely things I have to put into it. So to me, this is actually value for money. You might think I'm crazy, but that's where I see the value for money. This is cheaper than actually building new houses. So you can see some of this, you can see on the right-hand side, that's actually the building falling off. That the whole right-hand side of this building literally was ready to fall off. We've worked quite a lot with our conservation officer as well, how we could deliver this building. You can see, like any vacant building, there was a lot of vegetation growth in here. We had temporary propping, rotten timbers, mold, no ventilation, dampness. You can see the examples here. We had rotten lintels, plasterwork just literally falling off the building. We've all been into these buildings. There's the timbers. That was actually the floor. So you can see how rotten the floors were. They were beautiful. I thank God I didn't step on them or do any Irish dancing on them, because I would have gone through them. You can actually see the right-hand side is like a cut section through the building. This is a rare effect that you'll ever get in the building. We were actually able to cut this building because we had to cut the facade. So that's actually the facade cut in half, basically. So you can actually see the makeup of the building. So when I look at these buildings, they're simple. There's floor, ceilings, and walls. That's what a building is to me. We all talk about 4 walls, a ceiling, and a roof. That's generally what we describe a building. And when we look at it in technical terms, that's what I look at. I know we're really talking about Part B here today, but I'm going to touch on a couple of others, because you can't do Part B without others. They all have an implication for each other. So to me, if I'm thinking about floors or ceilings, particularly suspended floors or ceilings, this is what I think is the Bible, the white book. Now, there's other people out there who have it. It's the same concept. We all use the same thing. But to me, this is so simple. So in this case, it was timber structure. You flick over to page, I think it's 529, I think. This is sad. This is how sad our life is, that we remember these pages. For structural timber joists. It's really important to read it, though. I suppose you can just go, oh yeah, that one will do me. But it's actually important to read what you're actually trying to achieve here and what you're actually going to deliver. So there's a diagram, detail, depth, gives you the plasterboard, whatever you require, the thicknesses, the layers, the noggings. It gives you the maximum load, sound, etc., etc. A lot of people forget about this one, maximum load. So you can't have a grand piano in that. You can only have a baby piano if you use detail 5, because you can only have 60% of the load on the floor. But a lot of people miss that. That's the piece that people miss. A lot of people forget about the noggings. Again, you get into this. If you read the detail, 22mm T&G board. A lot of people put in 22mm, but they forget the T&G board. First thing I make them do is rip it up. It's not compliant. It's not a system. I'm not certifying it. They forget to read the little important things. Again, on this one on the left, 600 centres. The one on the right, 450 centres. Did they put in the noggins? These are the little things for me that we have to get our heads around, and we have to really understand it. Whether we're building control, architects, engineers, consultants, whatever we are, we really have to understand the systems that we're putting in place. This is an example of the detail in this building that I spoke about. So we have timber joists. We had to put in new timber joists. They were rotten. You saw the images. We have an acoustic board finish on the top. Below that, we have 2 layers of plasterboard. We have a service zone because we don't want any penetrations through the plasterboard. And then we have another layer of plasterboard in the floor. That's our build-up. So it's compliant with Part A, B, D, E. Probably 1 or 2 others that I've missed as well. So you just can't think about Part B. You have to think about all the other parts to go with that and the implications of the other parts to go with Part B. So this is something that we use in all our projects. It's an acoustic board, basically. ISO check, we can't use specifications, but this is what everybody uses generally in the Waterford area, the builders that we deal with. What it is there's an acoustic film, and then there's a board, a T&G board on it. And we've got this check from a fire perspective, and it's acceptable, or approved, sorry is the word. You can do an Irish jig on this, and you will not hear it below. And that's very important when you're trying to bring apartment living into Ireland, because every apartment in Ireland, generally, if someone walks above upstairs in the timber floor, you'll hear it down below. This is a brilliant system that we found, and we're using it now in all our buildings. It was a builder brought this to our attention. But it's a very simple system and very cost effective, not much more than what you pay for a standard floor. Below that, you can see we had 2 pink layers of board. We have a suspended ceiling. But things people forget about, I'm going back to the detail again. So things people forget about. There's a requirement for a step-in shower in these. You can't build a shower into the ground, because if you build a shower into the ground, the shower tray into the ground, it has structure, it has fire implications, sound issues. People forget about these, but they're the important things that you forget about. Also your services, where are you going to bring your penetration through your services? But these are the vital things that we find when we go out as a housing authority and we find these issues constantly. And again, you can see I've kind of highlighted part B, D, F, and H. It has implications to those. Unfortunately, in that case, there was no major plasterwork. We do have buildings where we do have plasterwork. This is a detail that we use in Waterford. Thanks to Shaftesbury Architects, we've copied and pasted it and used it several times. Our fire officer is happy with it, or he hasn't complained to me yet that we're not allowed to use it. Again, our building controller are happy with this, but we can achieve 50 minutes even with lath and plaster. It can be done. Again, it's how it's going to be done. I suppose the walls, again, I'm speaking about external walls for a couple of minutes. It's not a part B issue, but you have to think about these when you're dealing with existing buildings. That's just a diagram. Everybody here should know what an existing wall is, your stone rubble versus your cavity. I'm not going to explain that. Cavity has a cavity for a reason. It's to let water out. Solid walls, water goes through. This is actually more important. All these existing buildings should be breathable. If they're not breathable, you'll get what's on the right. You'll get condensation, you get rotten timbers, plasterwork will start falling off. If you just go in and put a standard insulated board on that, you'll have a load of mold growth into the future. If you have a breathable system, you won't. Luckily, I did a course a number of years ago on transfer of moisture, and this is a software that we use, and I know other consultants use it, called Woofy, where we can get examples of interstitial condensation or the amount of water going through this, but we can also run examples. If there's a crack in the wall, what will happen? We can run this through a life cycle of the building to see what moisture is going to be in this building and is there a chance of mold growth. These are vital things when you're working on an existing building. This is a system that we're using on this building that Philip is using, to be fair to him. It's Eyes Over Optima. We can only put in performance specs. As everybody's aware from a public procurement perspective, this is one that the builder came up with. We're satisfied it achieves the requirements. Very simple system. You can see the example of how you fit this on the right, the left-hand side, apologies. And you can actually see it being fitted on this wall in these photos. So we strip back the walls. You can see the stonework. We retain the timber cornicing around the windows. We have those and they will go back into the building when we're ready. You can see the one on the right where you have your metal frame, your insulation, and your vapor barrier, and then you can see the plasterboard below it. But when we're dealing with this building, you have to treat them. You have to treat them with care, I suppose, and you have to understand what the building is as well. And that's very important for us all to understand what these buildings do and what they're going to do. This is the building in its current state. This was a photo, I think it was about 2 weeks ago when we had lovely sunny weather. I think it's raining here in Galway at the moment, but this was a lovely sunny day. But you can see the building, it's come back to its majestic state. Now, it's not finished by any means, probably won't be finished till Christmas. But you can see what you can do with these buildings. This is back to St. Joseph, so the repair and lease job, and I wanted to point out a couple of learnings that we came across. So we had 71 people within this building living in it, and we painted the building to one colour. Big mistake from our perspective. This was a big old monastery, very hard to find your way around it. I'm an architect, I'm trained to read plans. Not 71 people weren't trained to read plans. People were getting lost in the building, so we said, what in God's name are we going to do here? So someone came one day and said, just paint the walls one colour on the corridors. So you're on the blue floor, the red floor, the pink floor, whatever colour we wanted. This has made such a difference to this building. Now, I know people have got used to the building, but even visitors, you ring the visitor, I'm on the blue floor. What floor is that? Come up and you'll see the blue floor. Just keep walking up till you get to the blue floor and you'll find it. It's such a simple concept that I suppose we need to get our heads around. The simple things are the answer to these. Part M speaks about LRVs. The amount of buildings that I go in when we're buying them into the common areas. You have white skirtings, you have white walls, you have white ceilings, you have white light sockets, switches, sorry. No distinction. We had an interesting, we brought a team in recently into us where you could actually put on goggles and it gave you a vision of a blind person or a disabled person and what they would see. My good God, guys, it frightened me. It's very important. Simple things like this are very, very important, but they're always, to me, I suppose they're forgotten about maybe when we're getting into the nuts and the bolts and we're thinking about, well, how are we going to get the cavity barrier in there or something. This is actually very, very simple and has a major effect on the person that's using the building. Wayfinding is another huge one. It drives me nuts as well. The amount of people that don't put wayfinding in their buildings. They certify them, full common areas. Where's the wayfinding? Oh, we don't need that. It's an apartment block. You do need wayfinding. It's in the requirements of the building regulations. Read them. It's simple. Doesn't cost much. You can see they're stickers. They're literally on the left-hand side is a vinyl sticker. That's all it is. What's that going to cost you? €100, €150? Very cheap. Massive when it comes to the people using the building. Doors. My good God, have I learned about this building and doors. You put 71 elderly people living in the building and they try to pull open the doors. Doors are big, doors are heavy. Doors are on door closers, doors close. We had one lady got caught in a corridor because she hadn't the power to pull the door. And when I started checking the doors, they weren't in compliance at the start. Repart them specifically says opening force should not be more than 90 newtons from zero if the door is closed, in other words. Hands up in the audience, who's ever tested a door to 30 newtons? Just for the people, I'd say there's about 5 hands up and there's maybe about 70 people here. I should have put my hand up. I had to learn how to do it too. This was huge. You put 71 elderly people living in it. It was massive. Massive difference to them when we started putting door closers. I rang a QS yesterday and they told me, fit a self-opening door closer cost you about €550. Not major money. Major money when someone gets stuck in that building and when there's a fire up there. It's a loss of life. We're to blame. We're certifiers at the end of the day. Again, this is so simple. We never think of it. That's my point. It's so simple, but we forgot about it. We know about it now and we've got it sorted. But it was huge. It was huge for those people living in that building. They couldn't bloody open the bloody doors. This is St. Joseph today. As I said, people living in it. Great, new community. A whole part of Waterford that was vacant for nigh on 14, 15 years now is alive again. It's opened shops in the area. Shops are closing down everywhere else and it's opened the local shop. All the people love the local shop. This is something actually came on my desk Monday. We were looking at this. On the left-hand side is a building that came to us and we asked for the fire certs and we asked for the as-bills. So the fire cert and the drawings and the issue of the cert of compliance is on the left. The drawings, the as-built, are on the right. To me, they're totally different buildings. But it's not. It's the building that someone certified to say it was in compliance with a fire cert. I have a lot of questions, particularly, see those 2 front windows that they're pointing arrows that you're going to get out? You ain't getting out those windows. There's not a hope in hell you're getting out those windows. We have to do site visits. Other than I have a great engineer and he checked into this would have been let through. So I don't know, has the person very reputable company that owns it, very reputable company that certified it as well. I don't know, was it just a miss? Was it an oversight? I don't know. I honestly don't know. We only found out about it Monday. We're in discussions with them at the moment. As a fire officer, would you accept that? I know I'm putting you under pressure here right now. Yeah, exactly. That was my view too. It's different. You couldn't. There's a whole corridor down the middle or down the left-hand side of the building where you never had it before. It's a 3-bedroom apartment. It was 2. That's totally different to me. But look, we'll come to that. One last further thing that we've come across majorly in recent times. We maintain it. I maintain it with my team. Maintains about 6,500 houses. EV scooters, EV bikes, and bloody EV cars. We've had a lot of house fires recently. Not cars predominantly, scooters and bikes. Guess what our insurance company told us recently? You ain't insured anymore if you have another fire with an EV bike or scooter in that location. Can't have them inside your house. How are we going to future-proof for this? Is that a fire issue? Something we need to bring into the building regulations? I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, but it's something I wanted to raise today. It's become a huge issue for us. Actually, there was a repair and lease job that we were looking at recently, and an EV car charging point had to be 5 meters away from the building because the insurance company is dealing with so many EV cars going on fire and having to pay out for it. Nothing to do with me, but I thought it was very interesting. We're all going down to EV. I love EV, do it myself, but we need to think about the future use of that building. It's important. But it's a question, I don't know if someone has an answer. I'd love to know the answer, what you do with it. I think it's important. That's me. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Walter. I think it's very good, like, and it's really the greater contravention between any of the other building regulations